Glass sliced through Marie's arm from elbow to wrist. White nightgown turned red. She was 7 years old, and she was bleeding for a wooden doll. Not for her sister. Not for her parents. Not even for herself. For a grotesque wooden figure with a broken jaw and a painted smile, defending it from an army of mice led by a king with 7 heads. Her parents found her unconscious in a pool of blood. Shattered glass everywhere. The toy cabinet destroyed. And when she woke, when she tried to explain what had happened, they threatened to lock her away. This is the Pandora's Project. Tonight, we unseal a record from 1816. A Christmas story written by Ernst Theodor Amadeus Hoffmann, one of the darkest minds of the Romantic era. Hoffmann was not a children's author. By day, he served as a Prussian judge, and by night, he composed operas and wrote tales of supernatural horror. His work obsessed over the boundary between imagination and madness. His most famous story, The Sandman, follows a young man haunted by something that might be a demon or might be insanity, ending with his suicide. Hoffmann never clarifies which interpretation is correct. That ambiguity, that refusal to choose between wonder and madness, defines all his work. Including this one. You know the sanitized version, the ballet, the sugar plum fairies, the happy ending where everyone wakes up safe. But the first edition, the one preserved in German archives, tells a different story. One where a child bleeds real blood, where parents gaslight their daughter for seeing truth, where a 7-year-old girl disappears with a stranger and her family never sees her again. The Nutcracker and the Mouse King. Not the version they perform in theaters every December. The version they tried to erase. Before this archive closes, you'll understand why parents stopped reading the first edition aloud, and why the bloodstain on Marie's nightgown was easier to explain than what actually happened at midnight. If revealing uncomfortable truths about beloved stories matters to you, let us know with a like. Subscribe for the next unsealing. The night Marie bled for the Nutcracker wasn't the first time something wrong happened in the Stahlbaum house. It started 3 hours earlier, when the parlor doors finally opened. Part 1. The Glass Wig and the Broken Jaw. Christmas Eve, 1816. In a respectable house in a respectable German city, there lived a respectable family. The Stahlbaums. The father was a medical counselor, a position of importance, dignity, and steady income. He wore proper clothes, held proper opinions, and expected his household to run with proper efficiency. Nothing unexpected, nothing embarrassing, nothing that would cause the neighbors to talk. The mother was everything a wife of such a man should be. She managed the servants, maintained appearances, and ensured that everything was always exactly as it should be. They had 2 children. Fritz was the elder, a boy of perhaps 9 or 10, sturdy and aggressive, obsessed with military things. Toy soldiers, tin cannons, wooden horses. He organized his toys into armies and staged elaborate battles in the nursery. He would grow up to be a soldier himself. Everyone agreed. He had the temperament for it, the hardness. And then there was Marie, the one who would bleed for something no one else could see. Marie was 7 years old, gentle where her brother was rough, quiet where he was loud, dreamy where he was practical. She had a favorite doll, a ragged thing she'd loved since infancy. She named her other toys and spoke to them as if they could hear, making up stories about the people who lived in the cracks of the wallpaper, the fairies who danced in the dust, the adventures waiting just beyond the edge of vision. Her parents worried about her sometimes. She was too imaginative, too sensitive, too inclined to believe in things that weren't real, but she was young and she'd grow out of it. All children did. It was Christmas Eve, and the children were in agony. The parlor doors were closed, had been closed all day. Behind them, their parents prepared the Christmas celebration. The tree, the presents, the candles, the wonder. Fritz and Marie waited in the hallway, forbidden to enter, listening to every rustle and whisper from beyond those doors. Fritz paced, declaring, "I bet I'm getting the cavalry regiment." Father promised, "A whole regiment with horses and cannons." Marie said nothing. She was pressed against the door, ear to the wood, trying to hear. Fritz demanded, "What do you think you're getting?" Marie said softly, "I don't know. Something wonderful." "That's stupid," Fritz shot back. "You should know. You should ask for what you want." But Marie didn't work that way. She didn't want a specific thing. She wanted to be surprised. She wanted magic. The hours crawled by. And then finally, a bell rang. The parlor doors swung open. The tree rose nearly to the ceiling, covered in candles, dozens of them, real flames flickering and dancing, making the whole room seem alive. Golden apples and silver nuts hung from the branches, and ribbons, paper flowers, and tiny figures dangled and swayed. Beneath the tree, presents piled high. More presents than Marie could count. Fritz charged forward immediately, tearing into packages, shouting with delight. The cavalry regiment was there, just as he'd hoped. A whole army of tiny soldiers on tiny horses with tiny cannons and tiny flags. He began arranging them on the floor before he'd even finished unwrapping. Marie moved more slowly, picking up each package gently, examining it, unwrapping it with care. A new dress, a picture book, a set of colored pencils, a doll, not as beloved as her old one, but pretty, with painted porcelain features. She was happy. Of course she was happy. These were wonderful gifts. But she kept glancing toward a smaller table in the corner. A table where different gifts waited. Gifts from Godfather Drosselmeier. In every respectable family, there's someone who disrupts the carefully maintained order. Someone whose presence makes the adults exchange worried glances. Someone the children can't stop watching, drawn by equal parts wonder and unease. For the Stahlbaums, that someone was Godfather Drosselmeier. He was the children's godfather, had been present at both their christenings, had promised before God to watch over their spiritual welfare. But there was nothing particularly spiritual about him. He was a clockmaker by trade, a maker of mechanical wonders, a man who understood gears and springs better than he understood human beings. He was also deeply strange, the kind of strange that should have been a warning. Small and thin, his face lined with deep wrinkles that spoke of years spent pursuing things that shouldn't be pursued. He wore a patch over his right eye, never explaining why, never speaking of injury or illness. The patch had been there so long it seemed part of his face, like his nose or his chin. And then there was the wig. The wig was glass. Real glass. Not painted or styled to resemble glass, but genuine molded glass formed into artificial curls. Light caught in it, reflected back in sharp glints. When Drosselmeier turned his head, the strands clinked together softly. Hoffmann based Drosselmeier on a real clockmaker he knew. A man who built elaborate mechanical theaters. A man children found unsettling. A man who never married. Fritz was afraid of him, though he'd never admit it. Fritz would never admit to being afraid of anything. He simply found excuses to stay on the other side of the room when Drosselmeier visited, found reasons to leave when the godfather began to speak. Marie was not afraid. She didn't know why. There was no logical reason to feel safe with this strange old man with his glass wig and his missing eye and his mechanical obsessions. But she did. She felt that Drosselmeier understood something about her that no one else did. Saw something in her that others missed. Or maybe she just loved the gifts he brought. On the small table in the corner sat this year's offering from Godfather Drosselmeier, a palace, not a simple toy palace, but an elaborate mechanical creation with towers and turrets and tiny windows, a working drawbridge, a courtyard with miniature flagstones, and figures. Dozens of tiny figures, exquisitely crafted, dressed in silk and velvet, smaller than postage stamps. When Drosselmeier wound a key in the base, the figures came to life, walking through the courtyard, entering and exiting the palace doors, bowing to each other, dancing with each other, parading in formation. A tiny king sat on a tiny throne while tiny courtiers paid their respects. The children watched, entranced, for about 5 minutes. Then Fritz frowned. "It's just doing the same thing over and over." It was true. The figures followed the same path, made the same gestures, repeated the same mechanical dance. Win the key. Watch the show. Wind it again. Watch the same show. Marie asked hopefully. Can they do something different? Can the king leave his throne? Can the dancers go somewhere new? Drosselmeier's smile flickered as he explained, "No, my dear. They can only do what they're made to do. That's the nature of mechanical things. They repeat. They don't improvise." Fritz had already lost interest, was back with his soldiers. Marie looked at the palace a moment longer. The tiny figures trapped in their eternal repetition, walking the same paths forever. It made her sad somehow. She didn't know why. But Drosselmeier wasn't finished. "I have one more gift," he said, reaching into the deep pocket of his coat. "Something special for Marie." He withdrew a wooden figure. Marie took it carefully, turned it over in her hands. It was about 1 foot tall, carved to look like a soldier, or perhaps a nobleman. But this wasn't a toy soldier. This was something else entirely. A nutcracker. In those days, nutcrackers were tools. Practical devices. You placed a nut in the figure's mouth, pulled a lever, and wooden jaws crunched down to crack the shell. Most were plain, simple, unremarkable. But this one was different. It wore a painted uniform, crimson coat, blue trousers, black boots. Its head was oversized, too large for its body, and its mouth was enormous, a wide, grinning mouth filled with flat white teeth. Its proportions were wrong. Its eyes were too large, its chin too prominent, its whole face slightly grotesque. "From the Ore Mountains," Drosselmeier said, noticing her staring. "The woodcarvers there have a tradition. When foreign armies tried to invade, tried to conquer that harsh mountain territory, they failed. The soldiers couldn't handle the conditions. The locals mocked them by carving these figures. Soldiers reduced to tools. Kings made into jesters. Authority made absurd. Marie didn't understand the history. She only understood that everyone else saw ugliness, and she saw something else entirely. By any objective measure, it was ugly. But Marie didn't see ugliness. She looked at the painted eyes, blue, with careful detail around the pupils, and she saw something. Sadness. Loneliness. A kind of patient suffering that had been there so long it had become part of the wood itself. "He's beautiful," she whispered. Fritz laughed and said, "Beautiful? He's hideous. Look at that mouth. He looks like a frog with a toothache." "Fritz," their mother said warningly. But Fritz wasn't done. He declared, "What good is he anyway? He's too ugly to play with. Let me try him. I want to see if he actually works." He grabbed the nutcracker from Marie's hands before she could react. Marie pleaded, "Fritz, be careful." But Fritz wasn't listening. He was already shoving nuts into the nutcracker's mouth. Small nuts first. Those cracked easily. Then larger ones. Then the largest, hardest nut he could find in the Christmas bowl. Marie warned, "Fritz, stop. You'll break him." The nutcracker's jaws strained against the massive nut. Fritz pulled the lever harder. Crack. Not the nut. The Nutcracker. 3 of its white wooden teeth broke off and fell to the floor. Its jaw hung loose, cracked along one side, the mechanism ruined. Fritz laughed and tossed the broken Nutcracker aside, declaring, "See? Worthless. Can't even crack a decent nut." Marie burst into tears. She scrambled to pick up the Nutcracker, cradled it against her chest, gathered the broken teeth from the floor. Her mother said gently, "Marie, it's just a toy." Marie sobbed, "He's hurt. Fritz hurt him." "Toys don't get hurt," her mother replied. "They're not alive." But Marie wasn't listening. She was looking at the Nutcracker's painted face, still grinning despite the broken jaw, still patient, still suffering. She found a ribbon from one of her presents and wrapped it carefully around the Nutcracker's jaw, binding it closed, making a kind of bandage. "I'll take care of you," she whispered to him. "I promise. I'll protect you." The Nutcracker said nothing. Its painted eyes stared at nothing. But Marie thought, just for a moment, that something in those eyes shifted. Something like gratitude. Something like hope. The parents saw a broken toy. Marie saw something else. And that difference would nearly destroy her. That night, something would come for her. Part 2. Midnight and the 7 Crowns. That night, after the celebration wound down, the toys were put away in the large glass-fronted cabinet in the parlor. Fritz's soldiers occupied the upper shelves, arranged in precise military formation. Marie's dolls and the mechanical palace took up the middle shelves. And at the very bottom, on the shelf reserved for broken or disfavored toys, sat the Nutcracker. Marie arranged him carefully, propping him up so he wouldn't fall over, adjusting his ribbon bandage. She said softly, "You shouldn't be down here. You should be on the highest shelf. But don't worry. I know you're special, even if no one else does." Her mother called from the hallway, "Marie, come to bed. It's very late." "Coming?" Marie replied. Marie gave the Nutcracker one last look, one last touch. She whispered, "I'll come back tomorrow. I promise." She ran upstairs to bed, but she couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. The house felt strange. The darkness seemed thicker than usual, the shadows deeper. She got out of bed, crept down the stairs, returned to the parlor, to the toy cabinet, to her Nutcracker. She just wanted to check on him, just wanted to make sure he was all right. The clock on the mantelpiece began to strike. 1, 2, 3. Marie counted the strikes, waiting. 4, 5, 6. The shadows in the room seemed to move. 7, 8, 9. The floor beneath her feet seemed to vibrate. 10, 11, 12. Midnight. And everything changed. The clock finished striking and the world went wrong. Marie stood before the toy cabinet, but something was different. The cabinet seemed larger now. Or was she smaller? The floor stretched away in all directions, the furniture looming like buildings, the Christmas tree rising above her like a mountain covered in fire. She was shrinking, definitely shrinking. The floor rushed up to meet her. The walls expanded outward. The whole room grew to impossible proportions. Or maybe the room wasn't changing at all. Maybe she was just becoming very, very small. Marie tried to scream, but no sound came out. She tried to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She was frozen in place, shrinking, watching the familiar parlor transform into a strange landscape of enormous objects and impossible shadows. And then she heard the scratching. It came from beneath the floor. A faint sound at first. Claws on wood, tiny and distant. But it grew louder, multiplied, became a chorus of scratching, skittering, scrambling sounds. The floorboards began to bulge, to crack, to splinter. And the mice poured out. Not ordinary mice. These were monsters, huge and grotesque, with gleaming red eyes and teeth like needles. They swarmed through the cracks in the floor by the dozens, by the hundreds, an army of gray fur and twitching whiskers. They filled the parlor, covered the floor, climbed the walls. Their squeaking was deafening, a high-pitched roar of fury and hunger. Marie stumbled backward, fell against the toy cabinet. The mice surrounded her, cutting off any escape. She could smell them now. A musty, rotten smell. The smell of dark places and things that should stay hidden. They were going to eat her. She was sure of it. These monster mice were going to swarm over her and tear her apart. And then she saw him. He rose from the largest crack in the floor, and even the other mice fell back to give him room. The Mouse King. He was enormous, as tall as Marie in her shrunken state. His body was covered in sleek gray fur, and he wore a cloak of what might have been velvet, trimmed with what might have been ermine. But that wasn't what made Marie's blood freeze. It was his heads, 7 of them, 7 mouse heads on one thick neck, each one wearing a tiny golden crown. 14 gleaming eyes, all fixed on Marie. 7 mouths filled with needle teeth, all grinning. He moved toward her, and the 7 heads swayed like flowers in a breeze. When he spoke, all 7 mouths moved at once, producing a sound like 7 voices speaking in unison. The Mouse King said smoothly, "Well, well, well. What have we here?" A little girl, all alone at midnight. Marie pressed herself against the toy cabinet. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. She whispered, "Please, please don't hurt me." The 7 heads laughed, a horrible squeaking sound. "Hurt you? I'm not here for you, little girl. I'm here for him." The Mouse King pointed one clawed finger at the toy cabinet. At the Nutcracker. Marie spun around. The cabinet door was swinging open, not by her hand, by itself, as if pushed from inside. And the toys were moving. Fritz's soldiers stepped down from their shelf, muskets raised, eyes now alive with painted fury. They formed ranks on the cabinet shelf, a tiny army facing the mouse horde. Marie's doll stood frozen in terror, unable to move, too frightened to act. The Nutcracker rose to his feet. His ribbon bandage was gone. His jaw was still broken, still hanging crooked. But he held himself like a soldier, like a commander, like someone who had been waiting a very long time for this moment. He drew a tiny sword from his belt, a sword Marie had never noticed before. The Nutcracker shouted, his voice strong and commanding, full of authority. "To arms! Soldiers of Stahlbaum, form ranks. The enemy is upon us." The mice charged. They swarmed across the floor, a gray wave of fur and teeth and claws. The toy soldiers opened fire. Somehow their muskets worked. Somehow the tiny weapons produced real bullets that struck real targets. Mice fell, but more came behind them. Always more. The Nutcracker leaped from the cabinet shelf to the floor, landing among the chaos. His sword flashed left and right, cutting down mice with every stroke. "For the children of light," he shouted. "For the kingdom. For Marie." Marie heard her name and felt something surge inside her. Pride. Terror. Love. She didn't know. She only knew that the Nutcracker was fighting for her, that he'd said her name like it mattered. But the mice were overwhelming them. For everyone that fell, 3 more appeared. They climbed over their own dead, teeth snapping, eyes gleaming. The toy soldiers were being pushed back, their ranks breaking, their formation crumbling. and the Mouse King hadn't even entered the battle yet. He came forward slowly, majestically, his 7 crowns glittering in the candlelight from the Christmas tree. The Mouse King squeaked in his 7-fold voice, "Nutcracker, we meet again. But this time there will be no escape." The Nutcracker turned to face him. He was already wounded, a cut across his arm, paint chipped from his face, but he raised his sword defiantly and declared, "I'm not running. Not this time." "Then you die," the Mouse King hissed. They clashed. The Nutcracker and the 7-headed king. Swords rang against claws. The Nutcracker was skilled, but the Mouse King had 7 heads, 7 sets of teeth, 7 angles of attack. The Nutcracker was driven back, step by step, blow by blow. His soldiers were falling around him, his army was being destroyed. And Marie could only watch. It happened so fast. One of the Mouse King's heads lunged forward while the Nutcracker was parrying another's strike. Teeth sank into the Nutcracker's sword arm. He cried out and dropped his weapon. The other head struck. Claws raked across his painted uniform. Teeth tore at his wooden body. The Nutcracker fell to his knees. The Mouse King loomed over him, all 7 heads grinning with triumph. The Mouse King declared, "And now you die as my mother died. As all who oppose the kingdom of mice must die." He raised a clawed hand for the killing stroke, and Marie found her voice and screamed, "No!" She didn't think, didn't plan, just acted. She tore off her shoe, the left one, her favorite, with the little buckle she loved, and threw it as hard as she could at the Mouse King. It struck him square in the middle head. The Mouse King stumbled, all 7 heads squealing with surprise and pain. The mice turned toward Marie, hundreds of gleaming eyes fixed on her. She'd revealed herself, made herself a target. The Mouse King recovered. His 14 eyes narrowed with rage. He hissed, all 7 mouths speaking as one, You dare strike the Mouse King?" He abandoned the fallen Nutcracker and rushed toward Marie. She scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The toy cabinet was behind her. The mice were everywhere else. She was trapped. The Mouse King reached for her with clawed hands. Marie stumbled, fell backward. Her elbow smashed through the glass door of the toy cabinet. The glass shattered, and shards sliced into Marie's arm, her forearm from elbow to wrist. The pain was instantaneous and overwhelming. Bright red blood welled from the wounds, dripped onto the floor, stained her white nightgown. Marie screamed. A real scream this time, of real pain. And suddenly, she was falling. Not just stumbling. Falling through darkness, through nothing. The parlor spun around her. The mice and the Mouse King and the Nutcracker all whirling together into a blur of color and shadow. And then everything went black. Light. Warm morning light streaming through windows. Marie opened her eyes. She was in her own bed. Her own room. Everything normal. Everything familiar. Except for the bandage on her arm. She tried to sit up and gasped. Pain lanced through her forearm. She looked down and saw white linen wrapped from elbow to wrist, spotted with rust-colored stains where blood had seeped through. Her mother was beside the bed, face pale and worried. She exclaimed with relief, "Marie, oh, thank God. We didn't know if you'd ever wake up." Marie asked weakly, "What? What happened?" Her mother explained carefully, "You had a nightmare, darling. You sleepwalked down to the parlor and somehow fell against the toy cabinet. The glass broke and you cut yourself terribly. We found you on the floor, bleeding. The doctor says you lost a dangerous amount of blood. Marie tried to remember. The mice. The battle. The Mouse King with his 7 heads. The Nutcracker fighting for her. She said urgently, "The Nutcracker, is he all right? Is he safe?" Her mother's voice was careful, controlled. "The Nutcracker is fine. He's back in the cabinet where he belongs. Marie, it was just a nightmare. You had a terrible accident, and your mind made up stories to explain it. But none of it was real." Marie insisted, "It was real. The Mouse King had 7 heads. The Nutcracker fought him. He said my name." Her mother and father exchanged a look. A worried look. A frightened look. Most modern editions delete this entire battle sequence. Too violent. Too graphic. Too much real blood from a real child. "Rest now, darling," her mother said, smoothing Marie's hair. "The doctor says you need rest. We'll talk more when you're feeling better." But the look between her parents said something else. Something about their daughter. Something about madness. Something about what they feared she was becoming. The doctor would visit every day for a week. The questions he asked were not about the wound on her arm. Part 3. The Curse of Princess Pirlipat. Marie was not allowed out of bed. The doctor visited every day, checked her wound, asked her strange questions. Did she know what year it was? Did she know where she was? Did she remember things that hadn't happened? Marie answered correctly every time. Yes, she knew the year. Yes, she knew she was in her own bedroom. No, she didn't confuse dreams with reality. Except when they asked about the night of the accident. Then she told the truth. The mice. The battle. The 7-headed Mouse King. The Nutcracker who fought for her. And every time she told it, the adults' faces grew more concerned. "Fever dreams," the doctor said privately to her parents. Marie heard them talking in the hallway when they thought she was asleep. The blood loss caused hallucinations. She'll recover. She just needs time. "But she keeps insisting it was real," her father said. Children do that. Their minds can't always distinguish between vivid dreams and reality. Give her time. If she's still confused in a week, we'll consider other options. Other options. Marie didn't know what that meant, but it sounded ominous. She stopped talking about the battle after that. Let them think she was getting better. Let them think she was learning to separate dreams from reality. But she knew what she knew, and she needed to know more. A week after the accident, Godfather Drosselmeier came to visit. He sat beside Marie's bed, his glass wig tinkling slightly as he moved, his one eye bright and knowing. He said softly, "I heard you had quite an adventure." Marie whispered, "They don't believe me. They think I imagined it." "Adults often think that about things they can't explain," Drosselmeier replied. Drosselmeier smiled, a strange, almost sad smile, and said, "But you want to know the truth, don't you? The real truth about the Nutcracker." Marie's heart leaped. You know what he really is?" Drosselmeier confirmed. "I do. And it's time you knew too." Drosselmeier settled back in his chair. He reached into his coat and withdrew the Nutcracker. The broken jaw had been repaired, the mechanism fixed. Drosselmeier said, "Let me tell you a story. A true story. Though it happened long ago. Once upon a time, and this is how true stories begin, there lived a king who loved sausages. Not merely enjoyed them. Not simply preferred them. He was obsessed with sausages. He thought about sausages constantly. He dreamed about sausages. He judged the worth of his subjects by the quality of sausages they produced. His queen, a sensible woman in most respects, indulged this obsession. She became the finest sausage maker in all the land. Her sausages were legendary. Dignitaries came from distant kingdoms just to taste them. Wars were almost avoided through the diplomatic power of her sausage craft. This might sound ridiculous. It is ridiculous. But that's how the story goes. One day, the queen was preparing a great feast, the most important sausage-making event of the year. She stood in the royal kitchen, surrounded by the finest ingredients, ready to create her masterpiece. And that's when the mice came. They poured from the walls, dozens of mice led by a great gray queen twice the size of the others, Dame Mouserynx. She was ancient, this mouse queen, her fur silver with age, her eyes clouded with years, yet she still commanded her horde with absolute authority. Dame Mouserynx squeaked, "We smell sausage fat, the finest sausage fat in all the land, and we demand our share." The queen was horrified. Mice in her kitchen, demanding her precious sausage ingredients. The queen shrieked, "Get out, filthy vermin! You'll have nothing from me." She called the guards, set traps, brought in the court cats. The mice were driven out, but not before Dame Mouserynx issued a warning, saying, "You'll regret this, human queen. You'll regret this bitterly. No one refuses Dame Mouserynx." The queen laughed. What could mice do to her? She was royalty. She had power. But Dame Mouserynx was patient, and mice know how to wait. Soon after, the queen gave birth to a daughter, Princess Pirlipat. She was the most beautiful baby ever born in that kingdom, or any kingdom, the proud parents insisted. Her skin was like cream, her eyes like sapphires, her tiny fingers perfect beyond description. Golden fuzz covered her head, promising magnificent hair to come. The entire kingdom celebrated. Feasts were held. Dignitaries sent gifts. The king was so happy he actually stopped talking about sausages for 3 whole days. They put the princess in an elaborate cradle in the royal nursery. They surrounded her with nurses and guards. They took every precaution, but they forgot about the mice. One night, Dame Mouserynx crept into the nursery, past the sleeping guards. Mice know how to move silently. Past the nurses. Mice know how to wait for the right moment. Right up to the cradle where beautiful Pirlipat slept. And Dame Mouserynx spoke words of power. Words of revenge. Words that twisted and changed and transformed. When dawn came, the nurses woke to find that Princess Pirlipat had changed. Her beautiful face was gone, replaced by something wrong. Her head had swelled to enormous size, out of all proportion to her tiny body. Her eyes, still sapphire blue, bulged grotesquely, and her delicate mouth had stretched into a wide, fixed grin lined with flat, wooden-looking teeth. She looked like a nutcracker. A living, breathing, monstrous nutcracker. The king and queen were devastated. Their beautiful daughter, transformed into a grotesque parody of humanity. They tried everything. Doctors, magicians, wise women from the mountains. Nothing worked. The curse held. And somewhere in the walls, Dame Mouserynx laughed. The court astronomer was summoned. He was an old man, this astronomer, who had spent his life reading the stars. He studied Princess Pirlipat's condition, consulted his charts, made calculations that took weeks to complete. Finally, he delivered his verdict. The curse could only be broken by the Krakatuk nut. The king demanded, "What's the Krakatuk nut?" The astronomer explained. It was the hardest nut in the world. So hard that a cannon could fire a 48-pound cannonball at it without cracking the shell. So hard that no ordinary nutcracker could break it. The queen asked, "Then how can we crack it?" The nut could only be cracked by the teeth of a young man who had never shaved and never worn boots. This young man would place the Krakatuk nut in his mouth, crack it with his teeth, and feed the kernel to the princess. He would then step backward 7 steps without stumbling, without looking behind him. If all these conditions were met, the curse would be broken. The king asked, "And if they're not?" "Then the curse will remain," the astronomer replied. "Or worse, it might transfer to the young man instead." The king didn't care about some random young man. He cared about his daughter. "Find the nut," he commanded. "Find the young man. Break this curse." And so the search began. The court astronomer couldn't go himself. He was too old for travel, but he had an apprentice, a young clockmaker of extraordinary skill, clever with his hands and quick with his mind. His name was Drosselmeier. Drosselmeier paused in his telling, let the name hang in the air. Marie stared at him and realized, You were the one who searched. Drosselmeier said, his voice heavy with memory. "I was young then. I traveled for 15 years, crossing mountains and deserts, oceans and forests, following rumors and legends, always seeking the impossible nut that could crack the impossible curse. I grew old during those travels. Lost my hair, replacing it with this glass wig you see now. Lost an eye, replaced with this black patch. Lost my youth and much of my hope. But I never stopped searching. And finally, in a distant city called Nuremberg, I found what I was looking for. The Krakatuk nut was in my own cousin's house. It had been there for generations, passed down as a curiosity, a family heirloom no one understood. Just a nut that couldn't be cracked, kept in a cabinet, occasionally shown to guests as an oddity. And my cousin had a son, a young man who had never shaved. His cheeks were still smooth as a child's. A young man who had never worn boots. He wore only soft slippers, a family tradition that now seemed like destiny. The perfect candidate to break the curse. My nephew was handsome, kind, beloved by everyone who knew him. He had his father's cleverness and his mother's warmth. When I explained the situation, the cursed princess, the impossible nut, the chance to be a hero, he agreed immediately, saying, "Of course I'll help. How could I refuse? A princess needs me." Drosselmeier fell silent, his one eye distant with memory. Marie's heart was pounding. What happened next? Drosselmeier looked at her, and his expression was unbearably sad. He said softly, "We traveled back to the kingdom. We thought we were going to break a curse. We had no idea we were about to create a new one. Outside Marie's window, something scratched at the glass. Once, twice, then silence. The curse would take 20 years to break, but breaking it would require something no adult could give. Only a 7-year-old girl who didn't yet understand what love should cost. Part 4. The Price of Breaking Curses. Drosselmeier continued. We traveled back to the kingdom, my nephew and I, carrying the Krakatuk nut that had taken 15 years to find. The nephew was presented to the king and queen, examined by the astronomer. Pronounced suitable. Perfect, in fact. Every condition met. The great hall was prepared. The entire court gathered. This was to be a moment of triumph, of celebration, of curse-breaking magic witnessed by all. Princess Pirlipat was brought out, older now, no longer the baby who had been cursed. The years had passed while she remained transformed. She wore finery, silk and jewels and elaborate gowns, but the beautiful clothes couldn't hide what the curse had done to her. The grotesque head, the bulging eyes, the terrible wooden grin that stretched from ear to ear. The court held its breath. The Krakatuk nut was placed in my nephew's mouth. He bit down. For a moment, nothing happened. The court waited. The king and queen leaned forward. Princess Pirlipat stared with those distorted eyes. Then, crack! The shell shattered. The impossible had been accomplished. The nut that couldn't be cracked had been cracked. My nephew extracted the kernel, small and perfect, and placed it in Princess Pirlipat's hand. She ate it, and she began to transform. Her swollen head shrank. Her bulging eyes softened. Her grotesque grin relaxed into a proper mouth. The wooden texture of her skin became flesh again. The monstrous proportions normalized. She was becoming beautiful. Not just restored, but more beautiful than before. As if the curse, in breaking, had to compensate for the years of ugliness it had imposed. The court watched in wonder. The king wept. The queen covered her mouth with trembling hands. But the curse wasn't broken yet. Not completely. My nephew had to take 7 steps backward. 7 perfect steps without stumbling, without looking behind him. He began. 1 step, steady and controlled. 2 steps. The court held its breath. 3 steps. Princess Pirlipat was almost fully restored now, her beauty returning with each passing moment. 4 steps. My nephew's face was calm, focused. 5 steps. The astronomer counted quietly, making sure. 6 steps. 1 more. Just 1 more step and the curse would be broken forever. And on that 7th step, Dame Mouserynx appeared. She had been waiting. For years, for decades, hiding in the walls of the palace, watching, knowing this moment would come. Knowing that sooner or later, someone would attempt to break the curse. And she had planned for it. She threw herself under my nephew's foot as he took that final step backward. He stepped on her, felt something give beneath his heel, heard the terrible squeak of a dying creature, lost his balance. He stumbled, fell backward, failed to complete the 7 steps properly. And the curse, instead of being broken, transferred. Princess Pirlipat completed her transformation. She became beautiful again, more beautiful than anyone had ever seen. The sapphire eyes, the golden hair, the perfect features. She was restored. She was magnificent. But my nephew's handsome face began to swell, his proportions distorted, his body compressed and stiffened. His mouth stretched into that terrible wooden grin. His eyes became painted things, flat and lifeless. He was becoming what the princess had been. A nutcracker. A grotesque wooden figure with a broken body and a frozen smile. The transformation took only moments. When it was done, a wooden figure stood where my handsome nephew had been. Marie's arm throbbed beneath its bandage. The scar pulsed like something alive. And Princess Pirlipat, newly beautiful, looked at her savior. This young man who had traveled across the world to find the cure, who had cracked the impossible nut, who had taken her curse upon himself. She laughed and shrieked, "Get that ugly thing away from me. I won't have something so hideous in my sight." The king, who had begged for someone to save his daughter, who had sent expeditions across the known world to find the Crackatuck nut, agreed immediately, declaring, "Remove him. He's done his job. We don't need him anymore." The queen said nothing. Perhaps she felt shame. Perhaps she felt nothing at all. Perhaps she was simply relieved her daughter was beautiful again. I tried to protest, saying, "He's my nephew. He saved your daughter. He sacrificed everything. He deserves gratitude, compensation, honor." The king interrupted. "He deserves to leave, and so do you. You brought this creature into our presence. You promised to break a curse, and instead you've given us this wooden monstrosity. You're both banished. Leave now. Don't return." We were thrown out of the palace. My nephew, now a nutcracker, now a grotesque wooden thing. And me, who had sacrificed 15 years of my life for this quest. We returned to Nuremberg with nothing but the curse. But Dame Mauserinks had one final revenge to deliver. As she lay dying beneath my nephew's heel, crushed and broken, she used her last breath to curse him further. Her son was watching from the shadows. A young mouse, not yet powerful, not yet a king. But he had 7 heads, this son of hers. 7 heads that would one day wear 7 crowns. Dame Mauserinks looked at him with failing eyes and gasped, "My son, avenge me!" The Nutcracker must die. He must never find peace. He must never be loved. He must remain broken and ugly forever. Hunt him. Torment him. Make him suffer as I suffered. And anyone who tries to love him, make them suffer too. The 7-headed mouse squeaked his promise, saying, "I will, Mother. I will hunt him forever. I will make him pay for what he did to you. I will make him pay for what he did to our family." Dame Mauserinks died, and the curse continued. Drosselmeier fell silent. The room was quiet except for the ticking of a clock somewhere in the house. Marie stared at him, her mind racing. She whispered, "The Nutcracker in our cabinet. He's your nephew." Drosselmeier's one eye glittered with something that might have been tears. He said, "He is. He's been trapped in that wooden form for 20 years, hunted by the Mouse King, unable to break free, unable to return to his human shape." The age gap between Marie and the Nutcracker appears in every version of this story. Every adaptation keeps it. Almost none acknowledge what it means. Marie said urgently, "But there must be a way. There must be some way to break the curse." Drosselmeier was quiet for a long moment before saying finally, "There is, but it's not easy." "Tell me," Marie insisted. Drosselmeier looked at her steadily and explained, "The astronomer consulted the stars again after we returned to Nuremberg. He read my nephew's fate in the constellations, and he found the answer. The curse can be broken when 3 things happen. First, the Nutcracker must kill the Mouse King. He must avenge the death of Dame Mauserinks, end the cycle of revenge that cursed him in the first place. Second, someone must love him despite his ugliness. Not pity him, not feel sorry for him. Truly love him. See past the wooden exterior to the man trapped inside. And third, that person must declare their love publicly, without shame, without reservation. They must proclaim before witnesses that they love the Nutcracker, that they choose him despite what he looks like. Only when all 3 conditions are met will the curse break." Marie's heart was pounding as she declared, "I can do that. I love him. I've loved him since the first moment I saw him." "You're 7 years old, Marie," Drosselmeier said gently. "You don't know what love means." Marie insisted, "I know that I'd do anything for him. I know that he fought for me. I know that when I look at him, I see beauty where everyone else sees ugliness." Drosselmeier smiled, a genuine smile, warm and sad and hopeful all at once, and said, "Then perhaps there's hope after all." He stood to leave, placing the repaired Nutcracker on Marie's bedside table. Drosselmeier said, "Get well soon, Marie. The Nutcracker needs you, and the Mouse King isn't finished. He'll come for both of you. He always does." He left without explaining further. But Marie understood. The battle she'd witnessed was just the beginning. The Mouse King had been hunting the Nutcracker for 20 years, and now he knew about Marie. That night, she heard scratching in the walls, getting closer. Part 5. The Tribute of Toys and Candy. Marie recovered from her injury. The wound on her arm healed, leaving a long white scar from elbow to wrist. A permanent reminder of the night she fought beside the Nutcracker. Her parents decided she was better now. No more talk of mice or battles. No more fever dreams or confusion. She was sensible again. Rational. Their daughter had returned to normalcy. But they were wrong. Marie knew the truth. The Mouse King was still out there. The curse was still active. And sooner or later, he would come back. She didn't have to wait long. It started 3 nights after Drosselmeier's visit. Marie woke to find a small folded note on her pillow. The paper was dirty, smudged with what might have been tiny paw prints. She unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was jagged, barely legible, written by someone or something unused to holding a pen. "Pretty little girl," the note read. "I know where you sleep. I know where you dream. The Nutcracker cannot protect you, but I can be merciful. Bring me gifts. Tribute. Every night, leave something for me beneath your pillow. Do this, and perhaps I won't come for you in the darkness. Refuse, and I'll take much more than toys. Signed, the Mouse King." Marie's hands shook as she read it. 7 small crowns were drawn at the bottom of the note. 1 for each head. She could refuse. She could tell her parents. But what would they say? They'd already decided the mice weren't real. They'd think she was having another episode, another breakdown. They might send her away this time. To a hospital. To an asylum. To one of those places where they treated troubled children with cold water and isolation and restraints. She couldn't risk that. So she gave the Mouse King what he wanted. That first night, she left her favorite ribbon beneath her pillow. Blue silk with tiny flowers embroidered along the edges. Her mother had given it to her for her last birthday. In the morning, the ribbon was gone. In its place, another note. "Good girl. More tomorrow." The next night, Marie left a small sugar candy shaped like a rose. She'd been saving it, had planned to keep it forever because it was too beautiful to eat. The note the next morning said, "Sweeter. More tomorrow." The tributes continued night after night, the Mouse King's demands growing larger, more specific, more cruel. He wanted her toys, one by one, the wooden horse she'd played with since she was 3, the small porcelain dog that always sat on her nightstand, the picture book her grandmother had sent from distant relatives. Then he wanted food. Cakes and cookies stolen from the kitchen, smuggled upstairs in handkerchiefs. Marie took them at night when the servants were asleep, terrified of being caught, more terrified of refusing the Mouse King. She grew pale from lack of sleep. Dark circles appeared beneath her eyes. Her hands trembled when she held her fork at dinner. She picked at her food, appetite gone, stomach twisted with constant anxiety. Her mother noticed but misinterpreted, asking, "Marie, are you feeling ill again? Should we call the doctor?" Marie lied. "I'm fine. Just tired." But she wasn't fine. She was being slowly consumed by fear and exhaustion. The demands escalated. The Mouse King wanted her doll. Not just any doll, but her oldest one, the one she'd loved since infancy. The one with the faded dress and the chipped nose. The one she'd named Sophie and told all her secrets to. Marie wept as she placed Sophie beneath her pillow. But she did it. She had no choice. The next morning, Sophie was gone. And the note said, "Your tears make it taste better. More tomorrow." Then he wanted books, first 1, then 3, then all her favorites. Her fairy tale collection, her adventure stories, her picture books with hand-colored illustrations. Marie's shelf grew emptier. Her room felt barren, stripped of everything that made it hers. And still the notes came. More. Always more. Or I come for you. She tried talking to the Nutcracker. She'd sneak down to the parlor at night, stand before the toy cabinet, whisper to the wooden figure inside. Marie asked desperately, "What do I do?" "He's taking everything." Soon I'll have nothing left to give him." The Nutcracker couldn't answer. Not during the day, not in his wooden form. He stood motionless on his shelf, painted eyes staring at nothing. But Marie thought she saw something in those eyes. Rage. Helplessness. The fury of a protector who couldn't protect. The tributes went on for weeks. Marie grew thinner. Her mother worried. Her father suggested perhaps she needed a different doctor, someone who specialized in nervous disorders, someone who could help with what they quietly called her fragile constitution. Marie knew what that meant. The asylum. The hospital. The place where troubled children disappeared. She couldn't let that happen. She had to be strong. Had to pretend everything was fine while the Mouse King slowly stole her childhood piece by piece. And then one night, the demand changed. Marie unfolded the note beneath her pillow and read words that made her blood freeze. Tomorrow night. Not a toy, not a candy. You, come to the toy cabinet at midnight. Come alone. Come willingly. Or I come to your bed and take you screaming. And then I kill the Nutcracker while you watch. Your choice, pretty little girl. Marie read the note 3 times, hoping she'd misunderstood. But there was no misunderstanding. The Mouse King was done with toys and tributes. He wanted her. All of her. She looked at the Nutcracker on her nightstand. She'd brought him to her room after her injury, kept him close, needed his presence even if he couldn't speak or move. Marie whispered to him, "I'll come. I won't let him hurt you. I'll do whatever he wants." The Nutcracker's painted face showed nothing. But in the candlelight, Marie thought she saw something glisten on his wooden cheek. Something that looked almost like a tear. The final note didn't ask for toys. It asked for her. And it gave her until tomorrow midnight to decide. Part 6. The Kingdom Beyond the Wardrobe. The next night, Marie crept down to the parlor at midnight. Her heart pounded. Her hands shook. But she went anyway. She'd made a promise. She wouldn't let the Mouse King hurt the Nutcracker. The clock began to strike. The familiar transformation started. The room expanded. Marie shrank. The furniture loomed like buildings around her. And the mice came. They poured from the cracks, from the walls, from beneath the floorboards, hundreds of them, the same gray army she'd seen before. At their head, the Mouse King approached with 7 crowned heads swaying, 14 eyes gleaming with triumph. All 7 mouths said in unison, "Good girl. You came willingly. That will make this easier," Marie said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Leave the Nutcracker alone. That was our deal. I come to you. You leave him in peace." The Mouse King laughed, all 7 heads moving. "Oh, I'll leave him in peace. The peace of death. After I'm done with you, I'll kill him slowly. Make him watch what I do to you first. Make his last moments filled with the knowledge that he failed to protect the one person who loved him." Marie said, her voice small and terrified. "No." The Mouse King advanced. His army closed in around her, cutting off escape. Then the toy cabinet doors exploded open. The Nutcracker burst out, sword drawn, his wooden face twisted with fury, and roared, "Get away from her!" He didn't wait for a response. He charged straight at the Mouse King, sword flashing. The battle was instant, brutal, desperate. But this time was different. This time, the Nutcracker wasn't just defending. He was attacking with everything he had. 20 years of curse. 20 years of being hunted. 20 years of rage. He fought like someone who had nothing left to lose. The Mouse King met him with 7 sets of teeth, 7 angles of attack. They clashed in the center of the parlor, Wood against claw, sword against fang. Marie watched, frozen. She wanted to help but didn't know how. The battle raged. The Nutcracker drove the Mouse King back, step by step, strike by strike. His wooden body was chipped and scarred, pieces breaking off with every blow. But he didn't stop. The Nutcracker gasped, "This ends tonight. 20 years. 20 years you've hunted me. No more." He landed a blow that took off one of the Mouse King's heads. The crown fell, rolled across the floor. 6 heads remained. The Mouse King shrieked with pain and fury, saying, "You can't kill me. My mother's curse protects me." The Nutcracker snarled, "Your mother is dead, and so are you." He pressed his attack. Another head fell, then another. The Mouse King staggered backward, his army scattering in panic. 5 heads, 4, 3, the Mouse King was weakening. For the first time in 20 years, he was losing. 2 heads, 1. The final head looked at the Nutcracker with something like disbelief and said, "This isn't possible. The curse. I can't. You aren't supposed to win." The Nutcracker said, "I already have." He drove his sword through the Mouse King's heart. The great 7-headed monster collapsed. His 6 fallen heads rolled across the floor. His 7 crowns scattered like fallen stars. The mouse army fled, poured back into the walls, disappeared into the darkness, leaderless, defeated, gone. The Nutcracker stood over the Mouse King's body, breathing hard, his wooden chest rising and falling with exhaustion. Then he began to change. The wood of his body started to soften. The painted features became flesh. The grotesque proportions normalized. The terrible grin relaxed into a real mouth. Marie watched in wonder as the Nutcracker transformed. His wooden body became human. His painted hair became real. His flat eyes gained depth and color. When the transformation finished, a young man stood where the Nutcracker had been. Handsome, real, human. He looked perhaps 20 years old, though those 20 years had been spent trapped in wood. He looked at Marie. His eyes, real eyes now, filled with tears. He said, his voice no longer wooden, no longer stiff, "You saved me. You loved me when I was ugly. You fought for me. You broke the curse." Marie smiled and replied, "You saved me first. You've been saving me all along." The young man, who had been a Nutcracker, who had been cursed for 20 years, reached out his hand and said, "Come with me. Let me show you something wonderful, something you've earned." He led her to the toy cabinet. But instead of opening the glass doors, he reached behind it, touched a panel in the wall that Marie had never noticed before. The wall opened. Beyond it was not the familiar interior of the house, but something else entirely, a passage, long and strange and glowing with soft light. The walls weren't wood or plaster, but something that looked like candy, like crystallized sugar, transparent and gleaming. The young man said, "This is the way to my kingdom, the place I come from, the place I was trying to reach when Dame Mouserinks cursed me. Will you come with me? Will you see where I'm from?" Marie took his hand. They walked together through the passage. It seemed to go on forever, winding through impossible spaces, lit by light that came from nowhere and everywhere. And then the passage opened up. Marie gasped. Before her lay a landscape unlike anything she'd ever seen. The ground was made of something that looked like hard candy, smooth and colorful, shifting through shades of amber and rose and gold. When she stepped on it, it made a soft musical sound, like glass bells ringing. A stream flowed nearby, but it wasn't water. It was liquid that sparkled orange, thick and sweet-smelling. Orange syrup, Marie realized. a whole stream of it, flowing through banks of spun sugar grass. The young man said, "The Orange Brook. It flows all year, never freezing, never running dry." They walked along the brook's edge. Meadows of what looked like candy stretched to the horizon, not grass, but thousands of tiny sugar flowers in every color imaginable. Red and gold and purple and green. When the wind blew, they chimed together like a million tiny bells. The young man explained, "The candy meadows. They grow wild here. Children come to pick them, but they always grow back by morning." In the distance, Marie saw a lake. Its surface gleamed unnaturally bright, reflecting light in sharp, clear flashes. They walked toward it, and as they got closer, Marie could smell it. Sharp, sour, familiar. The young man said, "Lemonade Lake. Real lemonade, cool and perfect, never bitter, never too sweet." Beyond the lake rose a city, not built of stone or wood, but of crystallized sugar and chocolate and marzipan. The buildings gleamed in colors that shouldn't exist, towers spiraling upward like twisted candy canes, bridges arching between buildings made of what looked like hardened caramel, streets paved with something that looked like mother of pearl but was actually compressed peppermint. The young man said, "Confectionburg, the capital of the kingdom of sweets. My home." They entered the city. People lined the streets. Not wooden toys or mechanical figures. Real people. They cheered when they saw the young man. Threw flowers. Called out his name. "Prince," they shouted. "Our prince has returned. The curse is broken." Marie realized with a start. He wasn't just some cursed young man. He was royalty. A prince from this impossible kingdom. The prince led her through the streets to the palace at the city's heart. It rose like a cathedral made of sugar glass, impossibly delicate, impossibly strong. Every surface caught the light and threw it back in rainbows. Inside, more people waited. Courtiers and servants and nobles, all of them weeping with joy. "You broke the curse," an old woman said, taking the prince's face in her hands. 20 years we waited. 20 years we hoped. And you came back to us." The prince smiled. But when he looked at Marie, his smile faded. He said softly, just to her, "I'm home, but you're not." Marie felt the truth of it. This was his world. Beautiful. Magical. Perfect. But it wasn't hers. Her world was the Stahlbaum house. Her bedroom with the empty shelves. Her parents who worried. Her brother who broke things. Her godfather who told strange stories. Her world was real and ordinary and sometimes cruel. But it was hers. Marie said, "I have to go back." The prince nodded. He'd known. Of course he'd known, and asked, "Will you remember me?" Marie promised, "Always." He kissed her forehead. A gentle kiss. A grateful kiss. A goodbye. He whispered, "Thank you. For seeing me when I was invisible. For loving me when I was unlovable. For breaking a curse that should have been unbreakable." He led her back through the crystallized passage. Back to the toy cabinet. Back to the parlor. And as Marie stepped through, as she returned to her own world, she felt herself changing. Growing. Rising. The room was shrinking around her. Or she was growing. Back to her normal size. Back to her real self. She blinked. The parlor looked ordinary again. Familiar. Real. Morning light streamed through the windows. The toy cabinet stood open. Inside, on the bottom shelf, sat the Nutcracker. Wooden. Motionless. Painted eyes staring at nothing. but his broken jaw was still repaired. And scattered on the floor beneath the cabinet were 7 tiny golden crowns. Evidence. Proof. Something real. Marie picked up the crowns, held them in her palm. They were solid, heavy, real gold. She heard footsteps in the hallway. Her mother, coming to wake her for breakfast. Marie closed her fist around the crowns and ran upstairs. She hid the crowns in her room, in a small box beneath her bed. Proof that it had all been real, that she hadn't imagined it, that the Nutcracker and the Mouse King and the Kingdom of Sweets were all true. But she never told anyone. What would be the point? They wouldn't believe her. They'd think she was having another episode, another breakdown. They'd send her away to the hospital where troubled children went and never came back from. So Marie kept her secret. She grew up. She became a young woman. She married eventually, had children of her own, lived an ordinary life. But she never forgot the Nutcracker, never forgot the prince who had fought for her, never forgot the kingdom beyond the wardrobe. And sometimes, late at night, when she couldn't sleep, she'd take out the 7 golden crowns and hold them in her palm. And she'd remember when she was 7 years old and loved someone so completely that it broke a curse that should have been unbreakable. And she'd wonder, was it real? Or was it madness? Had she saved a prince? Or had she simply bled on broken glass and dreamed of being special? She never knew for certain. And perhaps that was the point. The Kingdom of Sweets appears in Ballet. The 7-headed Mouse King does not. The tribute sequence does not. The midnight meetings do not. Wonder survives. The horror gets edited out. The 7 golden crowns stayed hidden beneath her bed. Evidence she never showed anyone. Proof she never explained. She kept them until the day she died. And when her children found them in the estate, they had no idea what they were, or why their mother had kept 7 mouse-sized crowns for 70 years. Final part. The Breaking Seals. Hoffmann published The Nutcracker and the Mouse King in 1816. It was never intended for children. The original audience was adults. Romantic-era readers who understood the ambiguity, who recognized the horror, who appreciated the uncomfortable question at the story's heart. Was Marie a hero who broke a curse? Or was she a traumatized child having elaborate hallucinations after severe blood loss? Hoffmann never answers that question. He leaves it open. Deliberately. Cruelly. Brilliantly. The evidence supports both interpretations. The realistic reading is obvious. A 7-year-old girl suffers a terrible accident, cuts her arm badly, loses dangerous amounts of blood. Her mind, trying to process the trauma, creates an elaborate fantasy. The mice, the battle, the prince. All of it fever dreams and imagination. The parents in this reading are not gaslighting her. They're trying to help her distinguish between nightmare and reality, trying to prevent their daughter from descending into madness. The fantastic reading is equally valid. Everything Marie experiences is real. The curse, the Mouse King, the Kingdom of Sweets, all true. The parents in this version are blind, unable to see magic, unable to believe their daughter when she tells them the truth. Hoffmann provides evidence for both. The blood is real. The broken glass is real. The injury is documented. But the 7 golden crowns are real too. Marie keeps them. Physical proof that something happened. Which interpretation you choose says more about you than it does about the story. Do you believe in magic, or do you believe in trauma? Do you think children see truth that adults have forgotten, or do you think children confuse imagination with reality? The story doesn't care which answer you choose. But here's what the story does say clearly, without ambiguity. without room for interpretation. Marie is 7 years old. The prince, when he was human, was old enough to have a profession, old enough to travel alone for 15 years, old enough to be considered a man. That makes him at least in his 20s, possibly his 30s, when the curse transforms him. 20 years pass while he's trapped as a nutcracker, making him 40, perhaps 50 years old when the curse breaks. And Marie is 7, when the prince takes her hand, when he leads her to his kingdom, when he kisses her forehead and calls her his savior, when he asks if she'll remember him. She is 7 years old, and he is a middle-aged man. The story presents this as romantic, as magical, as the proper reward for a brave little girl who broke an impossible curse. But read it again. Read what actually happens. A 7-year-old girl, isolated and frightened, receives nightly threatening notes, is extorted into giving away everything she owns, is told to meet a stranger at midnight or suffer consequences, and goes willingly, alone, in the dark. And when it's over, when the curse breaks, she goes away with him, disappearing through a passage in the wall. Her parents don't know where she is, don't know who she's with, don't know if she's safe. When she returns, she tells no one what happened, keeps it secret, hides the evidence, spends the rest of her life wondering if it was real or if she imagined it. That's not a fairy tale. That's a textbook description of grooming. Hoffmann knew this. He wasn't naive. He was a judge. He understood criminal behavior. He wrote horror stories about the darkness in human nature. He wrote a story where you can't tell the difference between magic and abuse, between wonder and trauma, between a girl who saves a prince and a girl who is manipulated by a predator. And he left it ambiguous on purpose. 24 years after Hoffmann died, Alexander Dumas adapted the story. He kept the surface, the mice, the battle, the kingdom. But he removed the ambiguity, made it clearly magical, clearly innocent, clearly safe. In Dumas's version, there's no question about whether it's real. It's obviously fantasy, obviously harmless. The uncomfortable implications are smoothed away. 48 years after that, Tchaikovsky turned Dumas's version into a ballet. He kept the sugar plum fairy and the kingdom of sweets. But he removed even more. Marie becomes Clara, older, less vulnerable. The prince becomes the Nutcracker, but without the backstory of being a middle-aged man. The Mouse King is just a villain, not a representation of predatory danger. The ballet is beautiful, safe, perfect for families, perfect for Christmas, perfect for children. And the original story, the one Hoffmann wrote, with all its darkness and ambiguity and uncomfortable questions, was buried. Until now. Fellow seekers of forbidden truths, we've unsealed something that was meant to stay closed, a story that asks questions no one wants to answer, that presents scenarios no one wants to acknowledge. Was Marie saved by magic, or was she groomed by a predator who convinced her that abuse was love? Did she break a curse, or did she suffer a trauma that she spent her whole life trying to make sense of? The story doesn't tell you. That's your choice, your interpretation, your nightmare to navigate. But either way, the 7 golden crowns are real. The scar on her arm is real. Something happened in that parlor on Christmas night, and Marie kept the secret for the rest of her life. If this unsealing revealed something you weren't prepared to see, let us know with a like. Subscribe for the next Forbidden Archive. Comment with which dark truth you want us to excavate next. And remember, the stories you tell children are never just stories. They're instructions, warnings, maps of the dangers they'll face. The question is whether you want them to recognize the danger or whether you want them to think it's magic. See you in the next tomb.